We continue our look at different opinions about the New York Giants with Coach Gene Clemons of Giants Country. We're going to be talking what we learned about the Giants, where they still need to improve, and much, much more on today's Locked On Giants episode coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL to get a free custom birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with any order. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traynor, your host. Happy Friday to everybody, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And a special shout out to all my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between, because I love you all, regardless of what status you are. And on today's show, we continue with our experts that we're bringing in to talk about the New York Giants. And those of you who are everydayers know the gentleman that's on screen with me. If you're watching on YouTube, he is Coach Gene Clemons, one of the writers over at Giants Country, the site for which I also manage. He also writes for The Athletic. He's got his own pod, Talking Spicy. He's doing all kinds of stuff. And yes, folks, he is a real football coach working down there in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So, Coach Gene, thanks so much for popping on with me.
Anytime. I appreciate you having me. Always good to sit down and talk some Giants with someone that is, a Giants fan, honestly, but not over-the-top Giants fan where you say something that might be, not as favorable, and they all of a sudden call you a hater. So I always appreciate the fact that, I can come on and we can have these good conversations without, there being attacks.
No attacks here from me. I mean, look, everybody has an opinion. I may not agree with all opinions that are expressed on this show, but look, so I'll listen. And, sometimes I've actually had people come on express an opinion and I'm like, I never thought of it that way. So it's all about being open-minded and, just being willing to listen to what other people have to say. And I know you and Emery Hunt, two guests that I have on the show as often as I can, always bring it with different perspectives and stuff. And I do appreciate that because it does make for interesting thought and discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think, and I actually listened to that, the episode with Emery on earlier, and it was interesting. I think that some people, sometimes the message gets lost in translation, what people are saying, but there was some very good discussions, very good debates. You were playing your devil's advocate role there, and Emery was giving you some good stuff. Things that I've always think about, and when it comes to any team, not just the Giants, is what's best for the team in order to win long term, and not just be good for a year or good for a couple of years. What's going to make them good for the long term? And so sometimes those things can conflict. And I think that from fans' perspective, like we have to remember that we don't have to be beholden to the same thing that the ball club is. Like we can like our players and like our team as well. We don't have to choose.
All right, Coach Gene, we got a bunch of stuff we got to talk about today, starting with what this Giants offseason tells us as far as how this team is positioning itself to be more competitive in 2023. And specifically, did they close the gap with the Eagles and the Cowboys? So let's start off with, the additions that they made, the things that, were reported out of the spring practices, the OTAs, which I know doesn't tell you a whole lot because it's not done in pads. There's no contact, but just based on, what they've added, what we know about the skill position players, the Wallers, the Paris Campbells, the Jalen Hyatt's of the world. How do you see the offense evolving in 2023?
Well, I think that one thing that we know for certain is there's going to be more speed on the field, right? We talk about it all the time. I think one of the big difference between the Giants and maybe the Eagles and the Cowboys is that there was just more speed on the field for the Eagles and even for the Cowboys. I think that from a speed standpoint, they have definitely shrink the gap. They're going to be able to put a 4x100 team out on the field that will compete with anybody's 4x100 team. I don't care what they're talking about down there in Miami. They're going to be able to compete with any team's 4x100 team when they go out there. And that's something that you could not have said a year ago. I also think that they have more dynamics in the different weapons that they have to employ. It's not just straight line runners at wide receiver. It's straight line runners. It's guys that can make you miss. As long as people stay healthy, it's going to be really interesting to see what this offense transforms and how it can disguise or rediscover itself on a week-to-week basis.
What about on the defensive side of the ball? They just really added Bobby Okereke, who's like the prime guy. Now they also drafted Deontay Banks for the back end. Some question marks as to who's going to be the second safety, who's going to be the slot cornerback. Do they have enough at inside linebacker to supplement with Okereke? I mean, how do you see the defense progressing in year 2 of this system?
I think Okereke is going to be big. I think he's going to have to be that stabilizing force at the linebacker position because as you know, the Giants like to play a lot of dime. They like to play a lot of nickel. And so there's going to be a lot of times where Okereke is the only linebacker on the field. The problem last year is that that one linebacker that was on the field last year was inconsistent. Sometimes they were hit, sometimes they were missed. And so if Okereke can be a solid galvanizing force at linebacker, I think the entire defense is going to be better for it because the number one place that we had the issue last year was with run fits. I also would caution the Giants defense on these dime and nickel packages. You're asking safeties to play linebacker. You better make sure those safeties understand their run fits. And so I think that was the number one culprit of the run defense last year is these defensive linemen are holding up their end of the bargain, but then you get to the linebackers and they're not where they should be. So if that improves, everything will get better. As far as in the defensive backfield, I think we have to start eliminating our traditional thoughts about defensive backs. Outside of maybe, Jackson, we need to start thinking about these guys as just DBs, not as corners and nickels and safeties, strong safeties, free safeties, because in this amoeba type of world that we exist in defense now, all those guys have to be everything. You have to be able to cover in the slots. You have to be able to cover outside. You have to be able to stay deep. You've got to be able to come down and hit people. So I think, and this is why if you look at the defensive back group, they all look like clones, it's because they're going to a more positionless defensive backfield where you'll see these guys moved all over the place. And so I think we have to stop thinking about it from the traditional free safety, strong safety, and think about it from the Xavier McKinney is going to be on the field. Jackson's going to be on the field. The rookie's most likely going to be on the field, most likely. But then there's going to be two other defensive backs on the field. And whether they're a corner or a safety or whatever they are, that's not going to matter because they're going to play all over the place. And so I think that if we start to see where the game is going, that positionless back end, there is a lot of depth. If everybody is healthy, if everybody can be ready and willing, it's going to be some real difficult decisions to make when it comes to who's going to be that back half of that defensive back group when it's time to cut.
Was there an area on offense and or defense that you felt like the Giants really could have maybe built it up a little bit more? And I understand that you can't fill everything in one off season, but is there something that's still missing in your opinion that maybe has you a little concerned about moving forward how it's going to play out?
Explosive edge rushers. I think that we are in a society where you need more than just starters. And I think behind um, Aziz and behind KT, there's not another explosive edge rush. There are guys who can play better, but I mean a guy that he just jumps off the line of scrimmage and puts pressure on an offense right now. I would have really loved to see them grab another edge rusher in the draft. I think that there were a few edge rushers that hit the free agent market for decent prices that they could have probably brought in. I just don't like the fact that when you get past Aziz and you get past KT, you're dealing with guys who don't, in my opinion, don't have the same level of explosiveness or dynamics that those two guys have. So now you need them to stay healthy. If they're not healthy, now that's going to hurt the entire defense. And that shouldn't be the case. I think when you're talking about these defensive fronts with these outside edge rushers, when you're playing two at one time, you really need three starters. And right now, I think that the Giants have two legitimate starters. They probably need a third one.
Fair enough, and certainly that's a concern that I have about this team moving forward. And speaking of concerns, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of these concerns with the team. I mean, a lot, not as many, I think, as last year, but we will certainly look at a few right after we take this quick break. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking for some pants or shorts that offer a good fit, are made of high quality materials, and just make you look good, then you got to check out Bird Dogs. They fit way better than regular shorts made of stiff, restricting cotton, and they use a special fabric that's designed to keep you cool and dry all day long. My husband absolutely loves his Bird Dogs. He's got a pair of shorts and a pair of pants, and he rotates them, wearing them around the house, outside when he's doing yard work, or just, hanging out. And if he loves them, I think you're going to love them as well. And right now, when you go to birddogs.com/lockedonnfl, they will throw in this free Yeti-style tumbler with every single order. Just go to birddogs.com/lockedonnfl to get your free gift. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnfl. Check them out, folks. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you that. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got Patricia Traina here, along with Coach Gene Clemons, and we're talking Giants getting ready for training camp, which will be here before we know it. There's about 6 weeks or so before the Giants open up training camp, so a lot can happen between now and then, including, Coach Gene, a resolution with Saquon Barkley, who can we say he's one of, if not the most important players that this team has?
Absolutely. I believe that he's the most important player on this offense. And even though people may not agree as far as his financial value, you cannot get past what he brings to the table on the field, and the fact that they still haven't even really fully like got him involved as a receiver the way that he was getting involved as a receiver early in his career. It's not because he all of a sudden forgot how to catch passes. So I think that at a second year in this offense and being able to work better in the dynamics of it, you could see an improvement there. But you got to get him under contract before that happens.
Now, I posted an article Thursday on Giants Country, and I got to read you these stats because when I saw them, I was like, wow. So, Daniel Jones, the article in question is titled "CBS Sports names this giant duo as the best on the team," and the duo, of course, is Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. And this is how Saquon has complemented Jones statistically speaking. Jones has 44 passing touchdowns and 17 interceptions in games in which Barkley has played, along with a 91.4 passer rating. And in games that Barkley has not been on the field, he has 16 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, and a 77.3 rating, which those numbers, I got to admit, they blew my mind because it's like, you look at the wins and losses and you say, okay, they're 19, 40, and 1 without Saquon, or with Saquon on the field, I should say. So you look at those numbers and you say, yeah, Saquon's a very important part of this game. Given the skill position players they've added, how can Saquon's value even be further enhanced, do you think, in this offense?
Well, what we hope will happen is that more weapons are being able to put pressure on defense, on more defenses through these weapons will open the field up and possibly allow Saquon to have even bigger running lanes. I think one of the things that having guys who can legitimately take the top off of defense, not just one, but three guys who can take the top off of defense. What it does is it means that your safeties can't cheat into the box. They're already, it's the NFL, they're playing 20 yards back as it is. But when they're not afraid of what you bring to the table, now they're sneaking to 14, they're sneaking to 12. And now that allows them to come downhill and be like effective immediately in that type of thing. So when you have them back, when they have them back and they have to stay back because you got a slack guy and an outside receiver both pushing deep, keeping you back. Now that's allowing a little bit more room for Saquon to get into the second level and do damage. I think it works both ways. If you get those safeties cheating up because they've got to help with Saquon, now all of a sudden those guys get behind, or if they get even, they're so fast that there's not many safeties that are going to be able to stay with those guys in a foot race. And so now that allows Daniel Jones to let the ball go and let those guys go and be athletes. So I think they complement each other very well.
You mentioned that, the Giants last year really didn't take full advantage of Saquon as a receiver. They're presumably going to open things up a little bit more this year. So that being said, if you were designing passing plays or passing concepts involving Saquon, what are some ideas that you would throw out there to maybe optimize things, maybe loosen things up for other guys if need be, or just make Saquon the central focus of it?
Well, I think that when you have a dynamic tight end, he's going to draw attention from linebackers and safeties. When you have guys who can take the top off the field, they're going to draw the attention from the cornerbacks and the safeties. So that means that a guy like Saquon is going to be matched up on linebackers. And outside of a handful of teams, many of which play in the AFC, who has linebackers who are going to be able to run step for step with Saquon Barkley, who are going to be able to move laterally the same way that Saquon Barkley can move laterally. So I think you'll have situations where you get receivers pushing deep, you'll get your tight ends working intermediate, and then you'll get a leak out from the running back that allows him to be one-on-one with an inside linebacker. And now that inside linebacker has to try to tackle a guy like Saquon Barkley in the open field. Good luck to him.
Yeah, Saquon, of course, can be, a load to bring down. Now, some of the criticism I have seen with Saquon's game these days is he doesn't quite still have the burst or the explosiveness or the abilities to, make guys miss as he did as a rookie, probably because of the injuries and whatnot. Do you see that when you look at his game last year? And if it is there, are there things that they can maybe do to kind of neutralize that?
Well, I think when people say he doesn't have the ability to make people miss, that's just false. Like he still cuts on the dime, he still jukes people, he still has an ability to dance if he wants to. I think it's been more purposeful by him this past year to not dance as much. If you remember, that was one of the criticisms of Saquon Barkley early in his career. Oh, he should just be more, he should just power it up in through there. Okay, well, now he's powering up, and now y'all are like, oh, he can't make people miss anymore. Which one do you want? Do you want him to run people over, or do you want him to shake people? Like, because I think he's doing a very good job of blending both together, and that's what happens. The longer that you're in the NFL, you figure out more ways to succeed. As far as like his open field speed, I mean, we just watched him run like an 80-yard or a 70-something yard run, where a team with a really fast person had a really good angle on him and barely caught him. I don't know if it's a speed thing. If he gets a lane and he's able to like, hit the home run, he'll still hit the home run. But if we're talking about the game, how many people are hitting home runs at running back these days from basic run plays? I think that's something that I think we're almost too consumed with it. Like, why does it matter? Like, how often do you really need your running back? I mean, how often is he realistically going to be going for 75 and 80 and 90 yards on a run? Like, there are some running backs who go their entire careers and never get an 85-yard run, never get a 70-yard run, never get a 65-yard run. But if he's consistently able to give you 3 to 4 large chunk plays, explosive plays a game, mixed with the 5 and the 7 and the 8-yard runs and the threes, like, that's a really good, really efficient, really effective game. So I don't know if he's lost the explosiveness. I think he has more attention put on him. And when you have more attention, when you're the focal point, people are just not going to let you get away all the time.
Certainly fair enough. Now, I'll put the same question to you that I asked about Daniel Jones, or what I've been asking about Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones obviously can take a step forward in year two of this system. Where can Saquon specifically take a step forward in year two of this system?
Well, I think being more involved in the passing game, being more deliberate in the passing game. I'd love to see more situations where they get him flexed out. They get him in the slot. They get him on a wing. They get him in a movement, actually running routes. Some of the things that he did in his first and second year in the league that we haven't seen as much in year 3, 4, and 5, but I think has an opportunity to come back, because now we're like he has 2 seasons that are removed from that knee injury. And if you think about the way knee injuries have gone, even though people are coming back earlier, they always say it's the second season after that knee injury that you see people really regain. Like, he wasn't rehabbing this offseason. There's no rehab this offseason. There's just been him getting better at football. Last year, even though he finished the year, he was rehabbing injury in the offseason last year. This offseason, he's been working on getting better as a receiver with the crew over in Arizona. Like, he's been doing things to get better as a football player instead of just getting healthy. And I think that is going to be something that is epic for this offense. If he can become the level of receiving threat that he was in year 1 or even in year 2, I think it's going to bode well for the entire team.
When you look at the receivers that they have assembled, I think a lot of people have compared it to a basketball team, that you got a guy that can basically do one thing. I guess, and I apologize, I'm not into basketball, so I don't really, understand the positions and all this stuff. But basically, you have a variety of different skill sets that you can mix and match. And I'm just wondering, how might they complement, like in terms of personnel packages? So let me see if I can phrase this properly. So you got Saquon, who can maybe run a wheel route. I mean, how is that going to benefit, say, another receiver, who maybe is running a different type of route in terms of fooling the defense or getting somebody open, or does it not matter?
Well, let's get into the minutia then. I'm always down for that. With a guy like with what they have, these combination of players. The one thing I want fans to be careful of, because I've heard this narrative that um 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 the new type Waller, that Waller is going to be essentially wide receiver number one. You don't want him to be wide receiver one. You want him to be tight end one, because the tight end allows him better matchups. The reason why Travis Kelce is so effective isn't because they flex him out wide and use him like a wide receiver. It's because they use him like a tight end, and there's nobody that can guard him as a linebacker or a safety. He's too big for safeties. He's too athletic and agile for linebackers. The same thing applies to Darren Waller. You actually take away some of his effectiveness trying to make him into more of a wide receiver. So how you take advantage of these different skill sets? You've got a guy like Wandell, who is a running back wide receiver hybrid, shifty, more quick and fast. So you would put him on a motion to the left, because we know that this offense uses a lot more motion than last offense did. And you bring him in a motion to the left, and now you send one of your fast guys, either Slayton or as Hyatt or as Paris Campbell. You send them on a seam route. You run Saquon on a wheel route. You've got to respect the seam. That takes the safety, that takes that underneath guy who has to play underneath. You got to respect the wheel, because that guy is Saquon Barkley, and we already know what he can do. Now, on the other side, you've got to account for Wandell, because they could drop it off to him quickly and let him go, and then he's out of there. Meanwhile, a guy like Waller just pauses for a second and leaks out into that underneath area that's been vacated by all of these super athletes that are spreading through. Now you give it to a 6'7", 255 pound tight end who can run with wide open space. That is the advantage that this team has that they didn't have last year. Because of the injuries, because of the dynamics, they just had a bunch of kind of the same dudes doing the same things. And no disrespect to Hodges, but he has his limitations. And no disrespect to Slayton, but he has his limitations. And so when you don't have those different dynamics to play off of each other, then you can't take advantage of it. I like the idea that when you bring in a 2 and 3 tight end set, you can have a blocking tight end, you can have a pass receiving tight end, and then you can have Daniel Bellinger, who's turned into a really good balanced tight end. So now you've got 2 guys who can block, but also 2 guys who can receive passes at the same time. But you're in a 3 tight end set, which tells the defense this is a run heavy personnel package. But then you come out and pass, because both of those guys are really good pass receivers as well. Like, these are the dynamics that they did not have last year, and I'm excited to see what Kafka and Dable do with this personnel in their second year.
Yeah, they've got certainly a lot more options. Excuse me, assuming, of course, they stay healthy. That is the big if.
Absolutely.
Before we take our next break, I've got to ask you this. I've asked this of a couple of other guests that I've had on this week, but I want your take, being a football coach and everything. Can the Giants succeed without a true number one receiver? And again, I know Waller is kind of the de facto number one receiver. You were saying that, he needs to be the number one tight end, but can this offense get by without a true number one receiver?
Yeah, and I don't think it's the quick answer is yes. They absolutely can. But I don't think it's because, they don't have a true number one. Because how many teams have a true number one? Does Kansas City have a true number one wide receiver?
Don't think you could say that.
They have Travis Kelce.
Right.
They have Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce is the number one tight end, but they surround him with a bunch of dynamic guys who do different things. And so I think that this coaching staff is smart enough to go, hey, we don't have a true number one, but you know we have a lot of number twos. We have a lot of guys who are number twos. We could say all we want about Slayton last year, but Slayton's performance was a number 2 wide receiver level performance last year. Paris Campbell was a number 2 wide receiver performance last year. You know, we bring in Hyatt. Hyatt's a guy who could be a really good number 2, number 3 wide receiver. Wandale, a really good number 2, number 3 wide receiver. Jamison Crowder, who I think is an underrated signing. He understands how to work. He understands the division. I think they have a lot of guys, and that's before you get into Isaiah. That's before you get into Colin Johnson, who I think if he comes back healthy may have something to say about making this team based off of his performance last year. And that's before you get into the 2 tight ends. So with all of these weapons and the depth that they now have, and I know that was the number one things that Joe Schoen wanted to do was to improve the depth. They've done that. Now, can they keep them healthy? That'll be the telling point, the sticking point. But at the end of the day, who needs a number one if you have 3 number 2s? I think 3 number 2s is better than 1 number 1. So that's the way I would go.
All right, that's a different perspective. I know a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, the Giants don't have a number one. They're not going to be able to compete like, the Eagles or like the Vikings or whatnot." But Joe Schoen did say at the end of last year that there were a lot of teams with number one receivers that were sitting at home during the playoffs. So
Hey,
maybe
the Giants sent a team with a number 1 receiver home.
right.
So in
So
the
I'm saying
playoffs.
maybe,
So
so maybe the concept is just maybe, I don't know, is it overrated? Sounds like
yeah.
it.
And the
Sounds like it.
NFL, your Super Bowl champions don't have a number 1 wide receiver. They have one of the best tight ends in the game. And so if
Mhm.
Darren Waller can be the Darren Waller that we hope he can be when healthy, you have a similar type of feel, except you have a way better running back than Kansas City has.
Yeah, definitely. All right, coming up next, we're going to wrap up with some concerns that we might have about the Giants, and also we'll touch a little bit upon what we might see this summer from the Giants. Don't go anywhere, Giant fans. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got Patricia Traina here on this Friday edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, along with Coach Gene Clemons, and we are chopping it up, always talking ball. And I love talking ball with Coach Gene because he gets into the little nitty gritty details and really makes you think. So, hopefully you guys are still watching. I know the pod's dropping a little later than usual, but Coach Dean's definitely, to me, at any rate, he's a great guest to have on, and the knowledge that he drops is tremendous. So, Coach Dean, let's talk about, looking ahead here to the summertime. Now, you've touched upon a couple of concerns you've had. You mentioned the lack of a speed rusher, an extra speed rusher. Let's go back to that offensive line, though, because that to me is a big concern. We
Mhm.
don't know who the left guard's going to be. We don't know how is Evan Neal going to round into shape. Is he going to take that Andrew Thomas like leap that I think a lot of people hope he takes? John Michael Schmitz is going to be a rookie. He's a rookie. He's going to probably be the starting center, but how's his adjustment going to be? Is Glowinski going to play a little bit better? To me, that offensive line is probably the top concern I have on the team. Am I crazy for thinking that?
Um, not crazy, but that offensive line last year still was good enough to get the team to, 9 wins in a playoff berth. So, probably the biggest growth that a player has is between year 1 and year 2. And so you have to be excited about, number 1, Evan Neal's improvement, because he's heard everything that we've said this offseason. He's heard everything that everybody said this offseason. Either that motivated him to get better or he's not the guy, right?
Mhm.
Either that motivated him to get better or he's not the guy. You got to think just from a technique standpoint, he's going to be better this year than he was last year. And for me, a lot of his issues were technique related. He just didn't have good, not footwork was bad, bad technique. I think the issue with a lot of these rookies is that they spend their entire offseason preparing for the draft. They spend their entire offseason preparing for like tests. They're not spending their offseason preparing to play against actual football players. Well, this offseason, he's been spending his summer and his entire time off preparing to play football. And I think that's going to be a benefit for him. Most centers don't have issues when it comes to transitioning from college to the pros because they've seen big, strong, athletic nose guards their entire life. So the NFL nose guard is nothing new. Like when we looked at what Baltimore did last year, when they took a rookie in the first round in Linderbaum, he walked in and didn't miss a beat as a starting center, and that's on one of the best rushing units in the game, even without Lamar Jackson. So I don't think that'll be a problem for Smith coming into the offensive line. The left guard is a question mark, but is it really a problem?
Mhm.
That's my bigger question. It's a question mark, but is it a problem? Because if you have faith in all of the fans say they have faith in Joe Shane, right? They all say
Mhm.
they believe in the coaching staff, correct? Well, he
Mhm.
took two guards. He took two guards. One of those two, whether it's Marcus McKeithen or whether it's Azudu, one of those two, it's time for them to show up. Both of those guys got hurt. So they essentially got a red shirt year to learn and in the offseason to train and get better. They're going to be there. There's still some other guys that are in the fold that have proven that if healthy, they could be good at that left guard position. That also means that if Glowinski isn't better, and by the way, I think part of him not being as good last year was because Evan Neal was not very good, and he's kind of getting the brunt of it because Neal is letting people slam across his face all willy-nilly. But if he doesn't play well, then do one of those guards who are waiting to try to get that left guard position now jump into that right guard position. I think there's more depth at all of those positions. That's going to bode well for competition. And so I think we'll get the best out of the offensive line that way. The one thing we do know is they've got a young group. So if this is the combination, this could be the combination for the next 10 years.
Mhm.
And that should be exciting for Giants fans.
Yeah, they can certainly sort that out, and to get them all, young and basically on the same trajectory, that would be a big plus for them, and also provide some stability for Daniel Jones so that this year, this time he doesn't have to go through a different starting center every year. He doesn't have to worry about, who his guys in front of him are, because it all blends together in terms of the communication, verbal and nonverbal. So moving to the other side, I think the other major question I have, besides who's going to be the other starting safety, is who's going to be the slot cornerback. And I of course asked Jerome Henderson about that. I said, are we moving more towards an era where you're going to play matchup football as opposed to having one guy in the slot? And he basically said, ideally you'd like to have one guy that can do everything, but you're right when you say that, oh, some plays you're going to face a big tight end in the slot or a big receiver or a smaller receiver, and you want to match up better. So when you look at the guys that can play the slot for the Giants, do they have enough there or are they missing something?
I don't know why people keep trying to replace Darnay Holmes. I don't know what this dude has to do in order to prove, like, he's just small. I'm convinced that the only reason people keep wanting to replace him is because he's small. Like, He played great last year. He had to clean up a lot of mess. There was a lot of mess that was left at the doorstep of Darnay Holmes, and he kept on showing up. He kept on showing up. I don't know why people want to keep keep replacing him, but guess what's probably not going to happen? No one's going to replace Darnay Holmes because he's smart, he's tough, and he's more athletic than people give him credit for. A former cornerback. But again, here's the beautiful thing about it. Because of the acquisition of Arwariye, and because of the draft, it allows guys like Aaron Robinson, it allows guys like Cordell Flott to probably focus more on being that slot guy than they've had to focus in the past, where they probably were being asked to be that field side, that boundary side corner. Well, now they have a guy who they think is going to be opposite of Jackson. So now they can focus on being the slot guys. Well, guess what? Now your depth's better. Now your competition's better. Now that means everybody's got to raise their game up. That's only going to help this secondary. I think that you're going to see a combination of dudes, and at some point you're going to see Xavier McKinney on the field and four cornerbacks. Like, whether they're slot guys or whether they're outside guys, you're going to see Xavier McKinney on the field with a bunch of corners. Like, do not be surprised when you see it, because that's the dynamic that they have now with the amount of depth that they have at the position. And so, they're deep. There's a lot of guys who got minutes because so many people were hurt. They've got legitimate film on guys that says he can play. If we really need him to play, he can play. And so, that's only going to help. That's only going to help with allowing everybody else to up their game, because they know if they don't, there's somebody behind them that can replace them. And so I think that a guy like Darnay Holmes loves that challenge. He's been underestimated his entire life. He is 100% up for that challenge. And I think when it all shakes out, he'll probably be there again, unless money and politics come into the situation. If money and politics come into the situation, Darnay Holmes could be the one that you see on his way out.
He might have to take a pay cut, similar to what happened with Darius Slayton last year. Because I think he's got close to $3 million cap hit.
Yeah, but Slayton was out of favor. Like, Darnay Holmes didn't do anything to be out of favor.
Right.
He played well. He performed. Slayton was not performing to a level of a guy getting what he was getting and said, you know what, I'm going to do this and probably keep myself from getting cut. Like, I don't know if that's the same. Like, if Darnay Holmes got cut, he's not going to end up on anybody's practice squad. He's going to be on somebody else's roster as an active member immediately. So I think that's the part that's going to be interesting. Like, can we get something restructured with him where we take care of him and he takes care of us? Or do we have to kind of cut bait because we need to give ourselves a little bit of flexibility and wiggle room, and we just have a lot of depth at his position right now?
Going to be interesting to see. Either way, I mean, a lot of decisions, a lot of sorting through that this team has to do. Punt returner, kickoff returner, amongst them, who's the starting safety, the slot cornerback, starting left guard, and a lot of depth positions up for grabs as well. Gene, final question for you: what position battle, whether it be for a starting job or a depth role, has you the most intrigued?
I would say probably the most intrigue will be who is the other inside linebacker. Like, what is it going to look like? What do they want it to look like? Are they going to go the route of some teams where they've just because Okereke is not that big of a linebacker. He is definitely in the mode of that new age, small, athletic linebacker. Do they want to see two of those guys on the field at one time? Do they want to match him with a bigger guy? Those are some of the things that I'm interested in. Is Beavers really a dude, or was he just looking good because we were lacking last year at middle linebacker? Does he come back from injury better or as good as he was? Can he shake out as that other guy, that thumper that they need in the middle? Do they go with two more athletic guy? I just want to know what it's going to look like. Is the other inside linebacker on this team right now?
Mm.
Like all of those things intrigue me about the position. I don't know. I can't say 100% that the other linebacker that will be starting for the Giants when we really get into the thick of it is on the team right now. But I can't say he's not. So that's the thing I'm really intrigued of. Everywhere else, we kind of know what it's going to be. We know who the guys are. We know where the depth is. We know where the depth is not. Special teams ought to be really interesting because a lot of these guys are going to have to make this team by showing that they can be plus on special teams, not just like be on special teams, but be better than the other guys who are special teamers if they want to keep their spot. And some of those guys who are special teamers are not going to want to get their jobs up. So it's going to be really interesting to see that unfold as well.
Yeah, when I did my very early 53-man roster projection, there were some tough calls there because of special teams, and there might be some guys that have made their living on special teams for this Giants team in the past that might not have a role this year. It's that tough, the competition. And we have
Absolutely.
I mean, this is
I'm thinking of a couple linebackers.
Yep, me too.
I'm thinking of two linebackers in particular. I'm not going to speak it into existence because I don't want to jinx them, but I'm thinking of two linebackers who have been making their bones on special teams. And they've been decent on special teams, but they have not been world beaters on special teams. That maybe they're going to have to step their game up if they want to continue to operate in those roles. So
probably the same two linebackers I'm thinking of too. I mean, it's not, we'll see. I don't want to speak it into existence either, but that just speaks to how deep this 90-man roster is, how much competition there's going to be. Probably one of the strongest 90-man rosters they've had in quite some time, I would say.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree that it is a beefy 90-man roster. Just as we've been going out and doing our look at the rosters, and we've been talking about these players over at Giants Country. Make sure y'all go and check out all of those as well. But when we've been talking about them, one of the things that we talk about is best case scenario, worst case scenario. And in a lot of cases, in guys that I have written about, the worst case scenario is just that there's too many people and they don't have an opportunity to really show what they can do because there's just too many guys. Like there's only so many reps you can put into a practice, and with having less padded practices, with having less opportunity to show in live periods what you can do, it's going to be hard for some of these guys who might be 3, 4, 5 on a depth chart right now to prove that they can be number 2 or number 3 and solidify themselves. So I think that's one of those things I'm really looking at. Like, man, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to show what you can do, and there's not a lot of room on that practice squad. Like everybody says, oh, put them on the practice squad, but no. Like you can only put so many people on the practice squad, and they're only going to be put by certain positions. And so it's going to be really interesting to watch unfold.
And it'll be fun too. It'll give us a lot to talk about as we get into summer training camp. which will be here before we know it, probably a little more than a month away. I believe everybody's, or not everybody, but I believe the first round of reports is going to be July 25th. And I think the rest of the team reports on July 27th. So we, of course, will have everything you need to know, not just here on the Locked On Giants podcast, but over on Giants Country, where, as Coach Dean said, we continue to preview each guy on the 90-man roster so that you don't say, who's that, when we talk about them in training camp. So check out that series over on Giants Country. Giant fans, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Special thanks to Coach Gene Clemons for coming on and dropping his usual fantastic in-depth knowledge. I mean, if you love talking ball, this is the man you want to be listening to. Folks, we will see you next week with all new shows, including a couple of interviews. Jeff Diamond will be on the program. Mina Kimes will be on the program. And I might have a few extra people coming on the program. But if not, we will keep bringing you content. So for Coach Gene Clemons, have a great weekend, everybody. And we will see you next week.